Have you ever noticed what happens when you stop trying to be chosen? Not in a loud, defiant way, but quietly, subtly. When you stop reaching, stop chasing, stop explaining, something begins to shift, not just around you, but within you, and the world senses it. In a society addicted to approval, the most magnetic person in the room is the one who doesn't need to be seen. We live in a time where everyone is trying to prove something. Scrolling, boosting, commenting, performing, desperately asking without using those exact words. Do I matter? But here's the paradox. The moment you stop broadcasting your worth is the moment people begin to wonder what makes you so certain of it. And that's when everything begins to change. When you withdraw your energy, you don't disappear. You become rare. People are drawn to what feels exclusive. We're hardwired to value what isn't readily available. So when you start preserving your energy, protecting your peace, guarding your time without apology, you stop being part of the noise. You become the silence everyone's suddenly aware of. Carl Jung spoke often of individuation, the process of becoming whole not by adding layers but by shedding the ones that were never truly you. And as you peel away those masks one by one, people begin to feel it. Not everyone will say it out loud, but they'll notice. Some will feel curiosity, others discomfort. But no one walks away untouched because you've stopped trying to fit, and in doing so, you've started to stand out. Let's be honest, most people don't know how to handle someone who's not seeking their approval. They're used to people proving, explaining, justifying. They're used to others bending to be understood, to be accepted, to be liked. But when you detach not with arrogance, but with calm certainty, you disrupt the entire rhythm of expectation. You become a mirror, a presence that doesn't chase but reveals. And what people see in that mirror is often more about them than it is about you. This isn't a game, it's a shift in frequency. You're no longer chasing, you're no longer performing, you're no longer explaining who you are to people who were never listening. And the irony, that's when people finally begin to listen. Your absence becomes louder than your words. Your silence begins to echo. Your presence carries weight, not because you raised your volume, but because you stopped giving it away. Your calm becomes a disruption in a world addicted to chaos. It's not that you've become unkind. You're just no longer available for shallow conversations, surface-level validation, or conditional love. Your energy isn't rushing to fill the silence anymore. It's sitting in it, unapologetically. And suddenly, people start noticing the very thing they used to overlook. Because your detachment isn't bitterness. It's clarity. It says, I no longer negotiate my worth. Jung described the persona as a mask we wear to survive society, but what happens when you take it off? The world becomes confused. Because most people are used to the version of you that performs, the one who explains, who seeks approval, who avoids conflict to keep the peace. But now they're faced with someone who simply is whole, quiet, powerful. And here's what happens next. They project. Some will admire your boundaries. Some will resent your silence. But none of them will ignore it because the stillness of someone who knows who they are becomes deafening to those who don't. You become a question mark in a world full of periods. You stop being easy to define, easy to reach, easy to use. And people don't know whether to be intrigued or intimidated by that. But that's not your problem. That's the cost of being real in a world built on illusion. You no longer give people the emotional comfort they're used to extracting from your constant availability. You don't over-explain, you don't overshare, you don't need to be needed, and that's what makes you unforgettable. You become someone who can't be accessed without intention. People now have to meet you on your terms, with effort, with presence, with depth. They can't just consume you casually anymore because you've stopped placing yourself on every shelf. And when you become someone whose presence comes with intention, you're no longer part of their convenience. You're part of their awareness. This isn't about being mysterious. It's about being aligned. There's a difference between disappearing and detaching. You didn't leave the room, you just stopped raising your hand. And suddenly people start asking themselves, did I overlook something real? Why don't they need me anymore? Were they always this grounded? They don't miss your noise, they miss your presence. And that's far more powerful. This is the shift that changes everything. You're no longer reacting. You're responding with purpose. You're no longer giving because you want to be liked. You give because it aligns with who you are. You've stopped explaining because nothing you say is louder than the way you carry yourself now. People feel it, and whether they love it or resist it, they can't unsee it. You become the person who no longer seeks to be seen, and that's exactly why you are you. You don't need to announce your transformation. It announces itself. You don't need to demand attention. Your stillness draws it in. You don't need to win people over. You simply let them reveal whether they're meant to stay. And that is the quiet, unshakable power of someone who has stopped needing approval. And here's where something unexpected begins to unfold. The very people who once overlooked you, the ones who dismissed your value, took your presence for granted, or assumed you'd always be there suddenly become unsettled. They start to reread your old messages. They notice the pause in your replies. They overanalyze the tone in your silence. Because something has changed. You didn't make an announcement. You didn't create a scene. You simply stopped showing up in the same way. And it speaks louder than any words ever could. You stopped pouring into people who never refilled your cup. You walked away without slamming the door. No explanations, no long goodbyes, just stillness. And that stillness, it haunts. Most people expect drama, not detachment. We're conditioned to expect exits that are noisy, angry text messages, unfollow buttons, emotional final chapters. But when you leave someone's emotional orbit without theatrics, without bitterness, you trigger a completely different response. You become a question mark in their storyline, an unresolved pattern in their mind. And humans hate unresolved patterns. Why didn't you fight for me? Why didn't you try harder? Why didn't you chase? The absence of conflict becomes more unsettling than conflict itself, because now they're left to wonder. You didn't leave for revenge. You left to return to yourself. That's the part they don't understand. You didn't withdraw to punish them. You detached to protect your peace. And that's why it's so disorienting for them. See, the brain is wired to recognize patterns to predict outcomes, reactions, and rhythms. That's how it finds comfort. It craves predictability in relationships. But when you suddenly stop reacting the way you used to, when you stop giving them the emotional responses they relied on, you interrupt that neurological pattern. And now they don't know what to do with your silence. You become the unresolved story they keep trying to reread. The truth is it's not even about you anymore. Their mind keeps circling, but not out of love, out of loss of control. They begin to analyze, rationalize, reconstruct conversations, trying to figure out what went wrong. But nothing went wrong. You simply evolved. They feel the discomfort not because you're gone, but because your absence has forced them to look inward. And for many people, that's terrifying. Because for so long, you were their emotional distraction, the person they turned to when they didn't want to deal with themselves. And now without you, all that's left is their own echo. What they feel isn't just regret, it's withdrawal. Just like the body craves a substance it's grown dependent on, the psyche craves emotional validation, attention, reaction, predictability. When you were always there, available, responsive, forgiving, they had their fix. But the moment you stopped playing the role they assigned you, their nervous system felt the shift. And it registers as a threat, even if they mistreated you, even if they took you for granted. It doesn't matter, because they assumed you'd always be there. And now you're not. But here's the most powerful part. You didn't have to prove anything. You didn't slam the door. You didn't burn the bridge. You didn't make an announcement. You just stopped explaining, stopped chasing, stopped giving access to those who didn't know what to do with it. And in doing so, you created mystery. And mystery is unforgettable. People forget the ones who beg to stay. They remember the ones who leave with quiet dignity. Becoming unattainable isn't about others, it's about you. It's not a tactic. It's not a performance. It's a return to your own center, to your peace, to your standards. You stop operating from woundedness, trying to earn love, seek validation, prove your value, and you begin operating from awareness. Your energy is no longer scattered across 1,000 maybes and what ifs. It's gathered, focused, intentional. And that shift, it doesn't just change your relationships, it changes everything. At first, it feels unnatural, even scary. We've been taught that silence makes us invisible, that detachment makes us forgotten. that boundaries make us cold. But it's the opposite. Silence creates space. Detachment creates power. Boundaries create truth. And in that space, you begin to feel your own presence again. You notice the leaks where your energy has been escaping. You notice the patterns, who you've been shrinking for. You notice the anxiety, what triggers it, what feeds it. And the moment you start honoring those signals, you stop abandoning yourself. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your healing. You don't need to explain why your circle is smaller. You don't need to justify your peace. You don't need to feel guilty for not being who you used to be. Because that version of you, always available, always agreeable, always overextending, was never sustainable. It was survival. But now you're choosing something else alignment. And that's when the shift becomes permanent. Your nervous system begins to crave peace more than attention. You stop chasing adrenaline. You stop looking for applause. You start seeking stillness. And that stillness becomes your sanctuary. You don't react. You respond. And only when it's worth your energy. Your perception sharpens. You see red flags sooner. You don't negotiate your intuition anymore. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. You no longer beg to be seen because you see yourself clearly now. And when you finally see yourself, when you truly see yourself, you stop accepting crumbs. You stop settling for half-effort love, for conditional friendships, for one-sided conversations. You stop hoping people will get it, and you start honoring the fact that you already do. That inner stillness we spoke of, it changes everything. Because when you're no longer operating from emotional noise, you start hearing things you missed before. You recognize manipulation before it wraps itself in charm. You feel energy shifts in conversations. You notice when someone's smile doesn't match their intention. Your intuition becomes sharper, not because it grew, but because your energy is no longer scattered trying to be everything to everyone. It's anchored, focused, centered on you. And that's the moment when people finally feel your absence. Not because you slammed the door, but because you were once everywhere, generous with your time, your empathy, your energy. And now you're nowhere, no explanations, no warnings, just gone. And in that vacuum, something sacred begins to emerge. That space you used to fill so easily, pouring your light into conversations, always making yourself available, it's now quiet, untouched. And ironically, it becomes more powerful than your presence ever was. People don't know how to respond to that kind of disappearance. Because we live in a world where exits are expected to be loud, where people yell before they leave just to make sure they're noticed. But when you leave with grace, with no anger and no announcement, it unsettles people. And they're forced to ask, why didn't they fight for me? Why didn't they explain themselves? Why did they walk away so calmly? And that discomfort, it lingers for them, but not for you. Because while they're questioning the silence, you're feeling something different. You're feeling peace, you're feeling clarity, you're feeling free. It's the kind of freedom that only comes when you've stepped back far enough to see the pattern. To see that you were never weak for caring. You were just misplacing that care on people who weren't ready, willing, or able to receive it. That realization doesn't just free you, it transforms you. You stop associating your worth with how much you give. You stop equating your value with how available you are. You begin to understand that your presence is a gift and not everyone deserves it. And when that truth lands deep in your body, your entire energy shifts. You stop fearing loss. You stop apologizing for putting yourself first. You stop explaining your silence, your peace, your growth. It changes the way you walk. You move with purpose now. You speak slower, with intention. You don't react, you respond. You're not guarded, you're grounded. And people notice it. Before they even understand what changed, they feel it. They feel you, not the old version of you they were used to, but the one that no longer needs to be chosen to feel whole. And here's the irony of it all. Once you stop caring whether you're chosen, people start chasing. Wait, because detachment, real peaceful, self-loving detachment is magnetic. It doesn't scream, I don't need you. It whispers, I already have me. And that whisper, it echoes. It echoes in conversations you're no longer part of. It echoes in spaces you used to overextend in. It echoes in the minds of people who didn't value your presence until they felt your absence. This isn't about manipulation. It's not about playing games. It's about stepping into wholeness. And wholeness doesn't chase, it attracts. It's not about pulling away to be mysterious. It's about standing so rooted in your own peace that people have to rise to your frequency or fall away trying. You're no longer chasing clarity from others because you've built it within yourself. You're no longer bending for connection because you've built one with your own soul. And you realize that the validation you were looking for wasn't theirs to give in the first place. And once you feel that, everything else becomes noise. The over-explaining, the over-giving, the hoping they'll finally get it. You lose interest in all of it because now peace is your priority and peace is addictive. You find yourself choosing silence over confrontation, solitude over shallow connection, presence over performance. You stop giving people free access to your energy just because they used to have it. You protect it, you refine it, you honor it. And the moment someone realizes they don't have the same access anymore, they feel it viscerally. Not because you've grown cold, but because you've grown complete. You become the kind of person who doesn't need to speak to be felt. The kind of presence that shifts a room, the kind of silence that teaches louder than any speech, the kind of self-possession that sets a new standard not just for others, but for yourself. And here's the most liberating part. You stop fearing being misunderstood. You don't flinch when someone misjudges your silence. You don't rush to fix every misinterpretation because you're no longer living to be understood. You're living to be aligned. Aligned with your peace, aligned with your purpose, aligned with your power. If any part of this resonated, I want you to do something powerful. Take a deep breath and ask yourself this. What version of myself am I finally ready to let go of? The one who overgave, the one who always replied right away, the one who needed to be chosen to feel worthy. Drop it in the comments. Let this be your quiet declaration. Let this be your shift. Let this be the moment you stop performing and start embodying. Because your energy is not cheap. Your peace is not up for auction. And your worth has never been tied to how well you play small. If you're ready to keep showing up for yourself and protect your energy like it actually matters, because it does, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with us.